Hi, I'm Rachel. Welcome to Life on Purpose. I invite you to join in on this journey to live a life of deep meaning and intention.
Welcome, friends, to this episode of Life on Purpose. And I want to start with a little story because my husband is the one who finds like the best people because he goes on planes and he is an extrovert. He actually talks to the people next to him and meets some of the most amazing people ever. And I am the one who goes on a plane and like puts in my earbuds, but doesn't necessarily want to talk to people. But he brings me some of the coolest people. So I'm so grateful to my husband for his willingness to meet others and be a part of other people's conversations and their lives and ask about them, because really everyone does have a story. Everyone does have something to offer. And so I'm just grateful for my husband. He's so great. So I want to introduce you to Brent. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him, and then I'm so excited to hear more about him, and I'm excited for you to really hear his story. I think you're going to just be inspired by what he has to say and offer. So Brent grew up in Wilmington, North Carolina as a pastor's kid. And despite this blessing, he lived most of his life as a well-meaning Pharisee and had no relationship with Christ. He went to UNC Wilmington, where he was a Division I track and field athlete as well as a finance major. And during his junior year of college, while on his way to make a suicide attempt, he had a miraculous encounter with God that changed his life forever. He went on to get involved in ministry with the InterVarsity Christian Fellowship and is now the regional director of church partnerships, as well as a specialist in the National Evangelism Department. He spends most of his days discipling young adults and consulting and training churches on topics of racial reconciliation and evangelism, and trying to represent Christ well to non-believers. Brent is proud to be married to his wife, Brittany, and the father of Noah, his first son.
He's
Brent,
he's so cute.
Oh, I bet he is so cute.
Yeah, he's adorable. He's 7 months now. So funny.
That is so fun. I love that. Well, thank you, Brent, so much for joining me.
Yeah.
I am so excited to talk to you, and I want to start off with your growing up life and what you meant in your intro as what that meant to be a well-meaning Pharisee for you.
Yeah, so I grew up in church my whole life. The whole time I was in church, and I was in Black church, Southern Black church. So it lasts for 10 hours. And it's every night of the week, feels like. So I was just I was inundated in a just a really positive church culture. But all that to say, like I was well-meaning in the sense that, how would I put it? I was trying my best to live according to the convictions that I had. There wasn't I wasn't like living this secret double life. At least not in the beginning. Let's put it like that. Right now, towards the end, especially as I got to the suicide attempt, yeah, I was doing all types of things because by that point I'd become pretty agnostic, and so I was living out those convictions, right? But no, I mean, I was doing the right things, I guess, largely for the wrong reasons. I wasn't aware that they were the wrong reasons. I've always been a pretty hyper rational, kind of legalistic person, just in general. I'm like, and so when I say well-meaning Pharisee, yeah, not all the Pharisees. Nicodemus was a pretty great Pharisee. Paul was a pretty great Pharisee. He just had to have a little shift in direction. So it just meant that like I was high on a certain amount of obedience and kind of litigious and very legalistic and not very loving, but pretty self-righteous, and I was the last to know it. I kind of shudder to think, like you look back in hindsight and you're like, oh my gosh, like I was so annoying, so annoying. But I was well-meaning. I wanted to live with a certain amount of integrity. I just didn't know Jesus. I didn't know that it had been communicated to me, but I didn't know that Jesus was a person. Like I didn't know God was personal. You know what I'm saying? Like um, that was an idea. It was a category in my orbit, and I certainly knew people in my life who, like my parents. You know, everything my dad ever preached, he did. Every little thing. So I just grew up in like the greatest Christian incubator ever, right? And I had these amazing examples. I'm like, they're serious about this. They like, they're not playing around. But like, I just couldn't make that connection. It wasn't obvious to me that God was a person. So yeah. So just mostly I was going to the leading worship and youth groups and telling everybody I'm gonna be a virgin till 2080 and whatever, right? I'm just whatever all the Christian things. That's and I but I didn't know Jesus. So
I'm really curious what your transition was during those years of like going from doing the things, maybe not feeling like that personal connection or personal knowing. How did you get to a place of feeling like life wasn't worth living anymore?
Well, Rachel, like every good story, there's a girl, and in the Bible, the girl's the church, I guess. But in my own life, there's a girl, and there were a couple features of my story. I was molested when I was younger, from like ages 4 to maybe 7. That really warped my perception clearly of myself in ways that were not clear to me till well after I became a believer. But the world around me and a number of things, and essentially how everyone finds a way to cope. And I didn't have the words to articulate it. I couldn't have articulated it this way at the time, but relationships were my salvation. They were both my chance to I feel like to rescue or save someone in a way that I wish someone had been, to be what I felt like I needed for someone else. They were an opportunity for redemption in a sense, because how people process abuse differently. For me, I processed it as if I had been smarter or if I had had more integrity, what happened to me wouldn't have happened to me. Because I had some inkling at a young age, like, oh, this is wrong. I should say no, but I never said no, right? Which is ridiculous. You can't blame a 5-year-old for, but that's how I internalized it. So all that to say, and I could say more clearly, but you probably get the shape of it. It just like relationships were just this. They were the gospel to me. That was the good news, the potential of a relationship where I could experience redemption and save and fulfill my purpose and finally put all these different things. So I met a girl, and man, she was just my opportunity. We were like the worst two people who could be together, like it just like like a perfect storm, and she had also had some unfortunate things happen to her, and so it was just like it was just this opportunity I felt like I was being given by God to like redeem my past and all these different things. So either way, how I make this transition is that relationship becomes God to me. I mean, it becomes my world, everything that I'm for. If you ask me, what do I want to do? Well, it's like, well, what does she want me to do? Whatever. I want to do whatever is going to make her happy and make me be a good husband and a good, like, and so I became less of a person so I could be whatever I needed for her. And just found like I didn't, God, I just didn't need God anymore. I have someone to go through when I'm in times of distress and despair, and she's the source of good and hope and a future and promise and redemption, all these different things. And so yeah, I mean, we dated for about 4 years, from my junior year in high school to my junior year in college. It was very serious. I was trying to marry her. I'm saving up. It's a real thing. And I'd always been a hyper sort of obsessive personality in the first place, so it was just so all that to say, well, I don't need God anymore. it wasn't as sharp and distinct as that. It's not like one day I said, well, God, I don't need you. You know what I'm saying? But it just over time, it became like, well, like, and then I'd always had questions, just like I'd always been kind of curious, maybe too curious, annoying, and I always had questions that I felt like Christians didn't have good answers to, in my tradition at least. Heavy on the tradition I grew up in had a bounty of a discipleship ethic around suffering and patience and obedience. Oh my gosh, but there wasn't a ton of discipleship of the mind. And I was just kind of oriented in a certain way. And so, so there were just different things. Like, I don't know, like Christians got bad answers. Like this is, I can't be dumb. And of course it's like, well, and I cannot be dumb, right? Because the reason what happened to me is because I was stupid. I can't be stupid again. So there was layers to it, but it just meant that ultimately, by the time we get to the end, I'm kind of like, I'm not sure if God's real. I think if he is real, he's probably the God of the Bible, but I'm pretty sure he's not real. And so either way, the relationship ends suddenly, terribly, like a Lifetime movie. It was just terrible. It was really, really, really bad. Everything I thought was true was a lie. It was just bad. And so I'm shattered, and I just remember being extremely depressed, which was a thing I didn't think was real. It's like, yeah, whatever, rub some dirt on it. I always crying, I was kind of, which is not fantastic, but that's how I was, but had never experienced despair like that. And in the middle of that, just had, I guess, epiphanies of like, just came to this understanding of like, man, like I'm one of the most privileged people I know, and life has still sucked. It was a theodicy question. It was a problem of evil and suffering question. I didn't have language for that. I'm like, but I know my life is better. Like my parents are better than everyone else's parents. I know that. That's obvious. So I wasn't ignorant of the blessings that I had in my life, and I'm like, and life still sucks. And when I lost that relationship, I just remember thinking about that. Like, man, this is like the whole world's like this. Like I could have been born 3 miles that way and experience way more suffering. So it was almost just like all these different sort of apologetic questions came that had been latent. I'd been asking along the way, but now they took on experiential force of like the problem of evil and suffering and just meaning, and all that to say, I'm saying too much. I end up being like, I don't think God's real. And from there it became, well, if God's not real, there's no point. Like there's like, if there's a point, there's no hope. There's no hope. I'm wasting my time. Like, and so I remember being in my room. It's probably like day 5, and I'm in a dark place. And I had this epiphany. It could have been. It's not clear to me if it was the devil or not. But the point is, I remember sitting on my bed saying out loud, I don't know why more atheists don't kill themselves, but it's either because they're too stupid to recognize the natural conclusions of their worldview, or they're too morally weak to carry through with their convictions. And I made a promise, I will never be stupid again. I will never be weak. And so I was like, well, I have to die. It's the thing I would do if I had any integrity, right? So I'm like, okay, time to die. So it's not like I wanted to. It wasn't even like life is, for me, it was a logical puzzle of like, I mean, it's the thing. If I really believe, like it's what I would do if it was true. Nihilism. I didn't have language for it at the time. I'm just like, well, okay, I should die. That's what you do. So, so I end up on my way to make this suicide attempt and have this miraculous encounter with Jesus, which I can share as much about as you'd like, but depends on how much time. And that changes my life and puts me on a whole new footing. Because now, if God is real, well, if God's not real, I have to die. If God is real, my life has been a lie. Everything that I've been thinking is not true. Everything in this book is true. There are answers to all the questions I've had, right? So there's new hope there. It changed everything, right? Okay, well, if you're real, then I'm an idiot, right? And you're the smart one. And clearly I haven't been a good God to myself. Like that hasn't worked out. So let's give you a shot. And so, yeah.
So I just want to really honor you putting these really articulate words around your experience as a young child, because I know that there are so many more people who can relate to that than we even know. And I love how you put to words the things that people experience, but we're almost not willing to say them aloud. And so just thank you for that vulnerability and that openness to be able to put to words the actual feelings, the actual reality of it.
Yeah.
Right. And
yeah,
I love how you're really explaining this seek for truth, this seeking, right? It wasn't like you didn't care. It was that you cared deeply.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. And they can look the same.
Yes.
Right. But yeah, it was
It was that you were thinking deeply. And I think sometimes that is, especially when you do have questions and you do decide, oh, I'm gonna live this way, or I'm going to live that way, and you make these transitions. People might say, oh, it's because you just don't care anymore. But really, I love how you are expressing it was because you deeply cared about being true to yourself. And I love that you recognize that you had kind of lost yourself along the way through this experience.
Oh, sure.
You were looking outwardly rather than, inwardly. And so, I would love for you to share this miraculous experience with us.
Okay. I will do my best to give you the highlights. So I mean, at this point, where should I orient us? As I said, I have this epiphany, whether it's, I don't know if it's the Holy Spirit or Satan or whatever, but I'm like, okay, like I gotta die. Like this is what I would do if I had integrity. And I think it over for a couple more days, and I'm like, this is, and life is just seemingly getting worse and worse and worse and worse, and so I'm just like, all right, well, it's this is what I need to do. And so I remember I ended up having this, well, it doesn't matter how I got there. I wake up, it'd been probably maybe 7 days since my breakup, or 8 days. And I wake up in the morning and I was like, okay, this is the day. I'm doing it today. I'd had a crazy dream. It doesn't matter, but the dream just further cemented, like, what am I doing this for? Like, what am I waiting around for? And so I remember thinking, okay, I'm gonna kill myself today. I had a plan. I knew where I was gonna go and how I was gonna do it. But I remember thinking, I know my parents will wonder if I gave God a chance. Like, I know that's what they'll wonder. And so as a way to honor them, I will pray. And once a little, sky fairy doesn't answer, great, but at least I did, I did my due diligence, right? And so I cobbled together this, this prayer from just different conversations that I've had with people along the way, and so either way, I'm like, so I'm praying this prayer, on my knees in my room. I'm like, God, like, give me the grace to forgive her. My dad, I had told my dad what's going on, right? And my dad, who's such a great man, he's like, son, because she had cheated on me. It was bad. It was really bad. I had an STD. It was like there was stuff. It was a rough situation. And my dad was like, son, you should pray for the grace to forgive her. And I was like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard someone say. Like, I was so pissed. I'm like, oh my gosh, stupid Christians and their terrible advice. I was like so angry at him. So a number of people who I was like, I'm struggling. I'm not okay. Like, I need help. And so I'm reaching out to different people, and they're doing their best, and but just giving me terrible advice. But either way, not terrible advice, but what felt to me as terrible advice, right? At the time in my headspace. And so I have this prayer that I'm praying, that I've patched and sewn together from these different conversations. God, give me the grace to forgive her. Take away the pain and give me peace. That's what I'm praying. I pray. I mean, it felt like I prayed that for hours. I'm sure it was probably like 40 minutes or something. I'm on my knees in my room. I'm praying this prayer. I don't know what I thought was going to happen, but whatever I thought was going to happen didn't. Right. And so I remember it's so dramatic. It's like a movie or something because I'm a dramatic person. But this is really what I did. Right. And so I stand up in my room. I look up to the ceiling, and I'm like, I always thought you weren't real. I always thought you weren't real. But you said if I ever needed you, you'd be there, and I need you now more than ever. And where are you? Nowhere. And so I'm like, okay. I grabbed my keys. I didn't want to do it in the house. My mom find me. I'm like, that would be very rude. So I headed to my car because I was going to commit suicide at my old high school, which is down the road. It's in the summer before my junior year starts of college, and so I'm at home for the summer. Grab my keys, go to the car. Long story short, have this thought as I go to sit into the car of, hey, you should pray again. At the time, I didn't recognize it as God speaking to me. I just thought I was having a debate with myself. It was a very clear debate. I said, you should go pray again. And I'm like, well, I just did that, so that's stupid. And then, because God really knows how to speak to us, he's like, well, technically, you have unlimited time because you're going to die anyways. So like praying again wouldn't be a waste of your time because time's irrelevant. I mean, it doesn't matter. You kill yourself in 5 minutes or 2 hours. I mean, it's like, it doesn't matter. And I was like, it's pretty sound logic. And so I head back because I'm scared. It's not, once again, it's not like I feel, I feel impelled. I have to kill myself. It's the thing. I have lived a life. This is my thought. I have lived a life of a lack of integrity and courage. And this is my self-perception. And my whole life has been worse because of these things, because I'm not smart enough, because I'm not wise enough, because I don't have enough integrity. I'm not courageous enough. Right. And that's my mental view. And even the reason that this relationship failed is because I'm not good enough. I wasn't attractive enough. I wasn't caring enough. I wasn't considerate enough. I wasn't wise enough to see that she was cheating. Whatever. Right. So it's like, I have to do something with integrity before I die, so I'm like, I have to die. Right. So, but I'm scared. And I'm like, okay, whatever. Well, I'll go back in prison. Okay. And so I go back to my room on my knees. I'm at rock bottom. I'm praying, and I pray this prayer again. I'm like, God, give me the grace to forgive her. Take away the pain. Give me peace. In the middle of the word peace, I start laughing. So I'm crying. I mean, it's like I'm not in a good place, right? So if there was a camera on me, you would have heard, God, give me the grace to forgive her. Take away the pain. Give me peace. I'm laughing. And I'm like, what? And I cannot stop laughing, right? And I'm like, what is going on? So I'm talking to myself, yo, what is going on? And so, my hyper rational, I'm like, well, I think maybe I just had a psychotic break, and I haven't been sleeping much. Yeah, like I'm in my head, but I can't. This is all while I'm laughing uncontrollably. I cannot stop, and I'm like, what is going on? I guess I'm crazy, and I'm literally. It's so funny because I'm thinking to myself, literally at the part where I'm thinking, I guess I'm crazy now. I guess my mom will take care of me. I guess. And I'm like, I get, and then literally I'm like, I can understand why people go crazy because this is like pretty great. This feels awesome. I understand. So I'm talking to myself, and then I hear a voice. To say I heard a voice. I can't say I heard it audibly. I can't say I heard it audibly because I don't think I heard it audibly. But that would make it seem as though it was less real, and that's inadequate to what I'm trying to explain. I heard a voice that seemed more real. It's not like it was less real. It was like more real. Anyways, I hear this voice, and what I mean when I say I heard it is I'm talking to myself, and I'm talking to myself about how, okay, I guess I'm crazy now, and I hear a voice, like a mental voice in my head, cut me off and say, no, it's me. Right. So imagine if you were singing your ABCs, and in the middle, you heard another voice in your head you get to pee and you hear a voice counting to 10. You'd be like, okay, who's that? Because I'm singing my ABCs, right? That's the best I could explain. And so I hear this voice in my head say, no, it's me. And then I'm like, what? So I'm freaking out. And at the same time I heard me, I'm sitting on my bed at this point. I feel these arms, I have the sensation that someone is behind me, holding me, right? And it wasn't like some flowery mental sensation. It was not cute. It was terrifying. I turn around and I'm like, I'm looking at my room. I'm like, who was that? What's going on? Right. So now I'm like, oh, I'm really crazy. Like, I'm really crazy, clearly. Because I'm like, Harry Potter's at you. You have the invisibility cloak. Like, what's going on? And I heard the voice again. No, it's me. And when he said it's me, I'm like, I know who it is. It's like it's like the I am that I am. Who should I say? It's not, what I'm saying? Like, it wasn't. That was enough. It was enough. It was clearly God and specifically the God of the Bible. And so I'm like, wait, you're real? And so now I'm freaking out because I'm like, wait, this doesn't make sense. Like, if you're real, and so I'm having this epiphany. Either way, I can share more. The point is, I end up from there. I'm like, okay, God, you're real, which is crazy. It's like you're either real or I am experiencing psychosis. Those are the two options, and I don't know which is which. So I'm gonna assume that you're real. And so now I'm like overwhelmed because I'm like, hey, all that stuff I said before, because I was roasting God. I'm like, whatever, all the types of stuff. And I'm like, hey, sorry about that. Didn't mean that. If you could forget that, that'd be awesome. But honestly, what comes to my mind is, seriously, I'm like, I know what worship is for the first time in my life. I'm like, I know what worship is. I know it's like random. It's a random thought because I talked to a mentor of mine 2 nights before or whatever, and I'm like, yo, I'm struggling. And he's like, you know what you should do? You should worship the Lord. And I was like, thanks. I hung up on him. Like, that's the dumbest. Like, that doesn't even mean anything. Christians are so annoying. They just say random stuff. But I have this encounter, and I'm like, I know what worship is. And so I go to the corner of my room. It's so funny. I go to where the corner meets, put my head down into the corner, and I'm just saying, thank you. I'm sorry. I'm sorry for all that stuff I said. I'm okay. Who am I? And thank you for having mercy on me. And then I experience for something like 20 minutes, I have an experience with God that it's hard to explain. When I finally got to 2 Corinthians, where Paul talks about, I know a man who was caught up in to the third heaven, whether in the body or in the spirit, I do not know, but he was caught up and heard inexpressible things that should not be repeated. And he goes on. I was like, I know that's it. But I didn't really have language for it. But I had an experience where I felt as though I was talking to God. I mean, I can't say face to face. It's hard to put into words. But I had a conversation with God that seemed every bit as real as the one we're having right now. And every bit as clear. It's not like, it was, and I don't know if I had a vision or a trance or if I was teleported. I have no idea. I just know that for about 20 minutes, I felt like I was in a different place and I was talking to God. And he in that 20 minutes, essentially told me 3 different things. One, it was very sarcastic with me. It was like, hey, you're not supposed to have any other gods before me. Like, you're not supposed to have any other idols. He's like, that's like literally the first rule. Yeah, that was like how he said it. It was funny. I remember it was like sarcastic. Like, that's like actually the first rule. And even though I'm in this Christian subculture now, that was not normal language how I grew up. That was a new thought for me. I did not grow up hearing the idea that a person could be an idol. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was completely foreign idea. And so God's like, that's like actually the first rule. And I'm like, oh my gosh. She what? And then he's like, hey, if I never meant for this to happen to you, but you wanted your life on your terms. And this is what your life on your terms gets you. And actually, if you had essentially, if you had trusted me, I was trying to tell you that this was not what I had for you. And he brought to mind, it was like, I don't know, like a Marvel movie montage of all these moments over the previous 4 years. He's like, remember that? That was me trying to get your attention. Remember that? That was me. Remember that? That was me. And I was like, and I remembered all those times of like, yeah, I thought that was you, but I didn't want to let it go. And he's like, yeah, this wasn't what I wanted for you. And then he's like, hey, if you'll stop running from me, I can give you a whole life of peace. Like, if you'll do what I've called you to do, I'll give you a whole life of peace. And I was like, all right, bro, like sign me up. I'm like, is it like a contract? Like, what do we do? And so I become a believer in my room, alone around like 8 a.m. in the morning. And then in the intervening probably month, because I'm such a skeptical person, I'm like, God, I'm crazy, bro. Like, I'm crazy. So if you're not real, like if I've made this up, if this is psychosomatic, if I had a localized psychotic break, I need to know, because otherwise I'm gonna give my whole life to you. If this is, I'm I'm not good at sitting on the fence. Like, and so he was very kind to me, and over the next month, just like kept reaffirming. I mean, like down to, I remember I was praying like, God, like, man, if this is like, I'm crazy. Like, just like, if that was really you, you gotta, it's like 2 or 3 days later, I get a call from a random woman in my church. And she was like, hey, I got your number from your mom. I was just praying and the Lord said to tell you, it's all real and you're not making it up. Okay, well, love you, bye. And I'm like, what? So for like 30 days, I felt like God was just being so generous to me. Like, oh, okay, make it wet. No, okay, now make it dry. Make it wet. All right. No, so so I become a believer and I come out of my room as a crazy person for Jesus, just like it was just there wasn't a refractory period. There wasn't like it was just kind of like, okay, God, if you're not real, I have to die. If you are real, I've been living my life in the wrong way. Everything I know has been, wrong, and this is it. And that ends up leading to, eventually ministry, because I'm like, oh, I need to tell my teammates like about Jesus. Like, they're a bunch of ratchets, D1 athletes. It's not, they need Jesus. And so from there, it just becomes, okay, God, I'll do whatever you tell me to do. And then it became pretty obvious I could not do anything other than vocational ministry, or I'd be promptly fired. So it was just like, all right.
Wow. Did you have that experience where you tried to do other things? Or you just knew your path was like, no, this is it?
Yeah, I mean, because at the time I had been in between getting med school or just more like investment finance or whatever. And so I was like, oh, God, if like, maybe I'll do this for you and some, whatever. Or, but either way, along the way, it just became like, because of my personality type, I'm a real, I have a real estate license. I tried to do real estate for a while, but I kept witnessing to people and I couldn't, and they'd be like, well, I'd ruin deals because I'm trying to witness to people, but I couldn't like not do it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, I could have conceivably not done it, but I'm like, but then I would never sleep again in my life. I really need to go to sleep. I have to have integrity with myself. So it just became like, I don't even necessarily see that as a mark of pride or something. I mean, it easily could be a mark of immaturity. It just was, it doesn't matter. The point was, it was just really obvious to me, like, this is, I need to do this. And so, so it changed my life.
Wow.
And I was 19 and became a believer, and man, just the way I saw myself differently. I was like, oh, wow, I'm so, just, I have no friends. I have no friends because I'm not a nice person. I'm kind of rude. I might be smart, but I use my intellect as a defense mechanism. Like, I'm really insecure. Like, it just like immediately I recognize, oh, that's why people don't like me, because I'm self-righteous and I'm a jerk. Like, I'm like, wow, I never saw this before. And I looked up. I had no friends because, of course, how could I have friends? My whole life was devoted to my ex and just things that I used to feel like earned me affection from God. Like, oh, I don't cut. They're just like it just there was like a clarity, a deep moral clarity, and like, oh man, like porn in my life, all these different things, and that God just like um wooed me out of, and exposed me. So even in my, and I end with this end scene, the end of my TED talk is that even on my days when I have doubts, I feel like my story is a bit like the story of Christianity, because it's kind of like, well, okay, what do we know for sure? What we know for sure is that there was a man who claimed to be God around about 2,000 years ago. And on the back of that story, the world changed. I mean, so you could say, well, maybe he wasn't God. Maybe he's a liar. Maybe whatever. Insert whatever you want. But you can't deny that the ripple effects of that have led to where we're at now. You can't deny that something happened. Clearly, something happened in the ancient Near East about 2,000 years ago. Something happened. We can disagree on what it was. And I feel that way about my relationship with how I came to faith. I'm like, okay, well, I'll talk with atheists sometimes. They're like, yeah, but what if it was this? I'm like, well, it's possible, but I've looked into it. It is. There, I'm unaware of any cases of psychosis that are only beneficial. Like, because I've asked therapists about it. I'm like, because, and so it's like, like that's just, sure, I get, maybe it's possible, but like, that's not what you would expect, right? You wouldn't expect that I would become more social, more empathetic, more wise, more, like it's just, you wouldn't expect for my life to become dramatically better in every single way. Habits that I could not break, and now I can. But it's just like, I mean, sure. I mean, that's what you want to believe, but that's a weird thing. And so yeah, I rest on that on my worst days of like, okay, but something happened. I came in that room and I was different, and everyone knew I was different. Okay, and blame it on whatever you want, but yeah, and it's been a pleasure since.
Wow, that is so much. And I love how you kind of went through the discussions that other people from the outside would probably see, right? They'd be like, no, that was just you making it up. No, that was like you hadn't had enough sleep, right? And so you went through that yourself, the process of like, wait, it could be this, it could be this, it could be this. It wasn't just an automatic like, oh yeah, now I believe.
Yeah,
And so
I'm interested. It's like, well,
yeah.
I want the, and I'm a skeptic at heart. I couldn't follow Jesus because I felt like, oh man, I have questions, and so God really, He used that for good, and it's why I love evangelism, because I feel like I get people. I really enjoy people who don't believe, because I feel like I understand you, like I get it, and I'm not offended by the, well, that's stupid. I'm like, yeah, I mean, yeah, of course you think that's stupid. Yeah,
You almost had to experience that though, to be able to say to someone else, oh, I totally see where you're at. Like,
yes.
I get that. I'm really curious because something you mentioned before was like growing up in this household, very religious and believing. And you kind of made this comment about like you were very judgy and self-righteous back then, right? Because you're like, I'm on the path. Everyone else should do this. I'm better than you because XYZ,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And then, but now again, you're in this very believing space. And so I'm curious, how are you in this very, you want to share the message, you want to share the light that you have, right? And the peace that you are experiencing, but how do you do that from that not self-righteous place, from that non-judgmental place? Because it sounds like both of these places were a belief in something, but
Yes.
one was you were using it in a way to make yourself better, and now you're using it in a different way. So I'm really curious about that shift.
Yeah, it's that whole knowledge puffs up, but love builds up, and so yeah, I had some form of I had something, but it wasn't rooted in love, and not because I wasn't. It's not even because I wasn't trying. It's, well, maybe we should have another call or something at some point, but it's not even because I wasn't trying, or I didn't think love had a place. It's because I would say the the philosophy of ministry I was exposed to was not helpful, in particular for people with my personality type. It may not be helpful for anybody, but certainly for people like me. And I would say, so in 1 Corinthians 2, Paul says to the Corinthians, he's like, hey, when I came to you, I didn't come with wise words and mature phrases in fear that your faith might rest on the power of my words. Instead, I came to you with a display of the Holy Spirit's power so that your faith would rest on the power of God rather than the words of men. And then he says, only later did I come to you with maturity and wisdom. And so that's like Paul's sort of evangelistic method to church planting, at least in Corinth. And at least for people with my personality, that's what I needed. What I needed to have an experience, one, that superseded my intellect, right? Something I could not easily attribute to myself. Okay, yeah, sure, I can try and go down some spiral hole of hell. Yeah, maybe actually, you were really okay. Whatever, I can do that, and I've done that. I've tried. But the reality is, that's unlikely. It's it's the least likely answer. And so I needed a moment that superseded my intellect, and then it gave me an introduction to a person, right? And so there was a relationship with God, at least for me, and I think for a lot of people, but at least for me, I could not have access to until I really believed God was a person that I could have a relationship with. And so I feel that the second half of the gospel, so the first half of the gospel is that Jesus, died for you while you're still in sin. It's great. I feel like that day in my room, I learned the second half, which is that Jesus is alive. Now, of course, I'd heard that story, but like it didn't make sense to me. But the idea that Jesus was alive, I can live with him now. I can have a relationship with him. Every bit as real as a relationship I have with you. Different, of course, different, but like just as real. I just didn't have access to that, and I couldn't trust until I had that. I just couldn't trust. So how it changed my approach, right, and how it changed, the self-righteousness is it gave me a lot more compassion for people who don't believe, way more compassion, and I stopped thinking, even though for some people they don't believe because belief is inconvenient for them, then they'd have to treat their body differently. Then they'd have to think differently about when life starts in the womb. Then they'd have to, whatever, right? There are down order effects that create inconvenience, and sure, those people exist. But a lot of them is they don't believe because they feel like they haven't been given a good enough reason to believe. They just haven't. So it gave me so much more compassion. It changed the way I thought about evangelism and witnessing, and so yeah, I don't know. It just felt like it was a natural when the other thing is I had no real clarity to my own sin. If I was just being honest, it was opaque to me. I just couldn't see it. And so I engaged with people with that with that mindset. I really thought I was better than them. I really thought that way. Whatever I said, I really thought that, and that if only you could be more like me, you would be a better person. But you can't. So sucks to suck. Of course there has to be grace for me too, because I was doing my best, but that's just the reality as it plays out. That's what people were experiencing. When I became a believer, in some ways it took me a while to sort of I was dramatically different in a moment, but I changed, I still did a lot of growing and changing over the next couple of years, obviously, right? But it did change my relationship with my teammates, where my teammates in some sense, couldn't stand me because they recognized in me a latent arrogance, pridefulness, and a sense of superiority, moral superiority, right? And they'd always articulated that to me, and I couldn't even understand what they were talking about. And then afterwards, I'm like, okay, I get it. So I stopped saying, you should stop doing this. Don't you know X? And I started saying, did you know that Jesus is better than sex? Did you know that? You probably don't believe that, and that's okay. You don't have to believe it. But if you come to Bible study and you don't experience something that's better than sex, then I'll leave you alone. But I think you will. I wouldn't say that now because that was childlike faith. I was, now it would be a tactic or something, right? So I don't witness in that precise way, though I take that same thing. But yeah, when I met Jesus, I'm like, oh, no, you don't get it. It's not that we follow Jesus because he's the right thing. I mean, that's whatever. Like Adam and Eve knew the commands of God were right. That didn't matter. That's not the fear the enemy preyed on. The enemy preyed on, yeah, but like, is following Jesus God really going to lead to the best life for you? Like, it's probably not. I think God's holding back on you. Actually, if you eat that fruit, you'll be like him, and then, whatever, right? And so it's a claim about God's heart for you, and the sort of life that he has on offer. So it just changed my whole mindset of like, oh yeah, my teammates don't believe in Jesus because they don't think Jesus has a better life for them than the one they're living. They might actually believe that, if they were more moral or whatever, they might believe like, yeah, God might be real, and it's probably the right thing to do, but they don't think it's better. But the experience I had in my room was better than sex. So it's like, but they don't know that. So it was just like, oh, it's like so obvious to me. I'm like, oh, well, like, yeah, if you don't know God's better than sex, then you'll run to sex. Or if you don't think, so it just became really, really, I don't know, simple and straightforward.
Wow.
And because God is really kind to fools and children, he just, I feel like in heaven, God was like, oh, Brent is out there saying crazy stuff again, but Holy Spirit, go help him out, just go help him out, right? Because but it was authentic. And so God really, he was just so kind to me. That's not quite my style anymore, but it's the same family. Like, yeah, God's better.
Yeah, I think that's pretty gutsy to say to some, football players. And yeah, I can imagine their reaction to that. But I'm sure they felt your authenticity in that. And at least it was something to think about. But yeah, I think
they became Christians, so it was, it took a while for me to have my zeal tempered by a certain amount of wisdom, but God was kind to me because it wasn't a heart issue. I'm a believer every word in this book. Like, okay, all right, then I guess. And so yeah, man, he just, and that led into some of the other stuff I wrote in the intro, but it just made everything easier.
Well, I love this conversation so much, and I want to shift gears to the forgiveness piece of this, because I know that that's something that you are, that you're writing about and you are passionate about. And so tell me about that forgiveness piece and how that has impacted you.
Yeah. In general, because God is really kind and he knows how to use our personalities, how to redeem them for good. I really feel like God took that sort of all in or all out, all or nothing, sort of almost pathological obsession with, integrity or whatever you want to call it. And he really, really redeemed it. How sort of the forgiveness parts come out of it were, well, one, I started reading the Bible for the first time as if it was true. And, so I'm getting to Matthew and I'm like, ooh, Matthew 5, 6, and 7. And you're like, oh man, like loving enemies, forgiveness. And so I'm not the first time I've ever, I grew up in church my whole life. I know those scriptures, but I don't know them, and I'm like, so that's part of it. And, but I would say, within 30 minutes after I became a believer, it was very obvious to me that I needed to forgive my ex. So it was like, oh, I need to, and even that, that was huge. My whole mindset towards her changed from like, how could she betray me and all these details, which aren't important, but like, how could she do this, to like, oh, I need to forgive her. Like, she needs to know that she's forgiven. And so there was already like, I guess like a desire there from God, but I guess here's what it was. I would say over that first year with Jesus, it became clear to me that most of the ways in which my life was not as good as it could be was because of a lack of forgiveness. First, a lack of forgiveness. All the way at the bottom, a lack of forgiveness for the 5-year-old boy who did not have the courage to say no, which motivated everything in my life. But I didn't even know I'd been abused until I became a believer, right? I mean, it's not, some people repress. I didn't repress. I remembered everything that happened. I just didn't clap. I'm like, well, sometimes, whatever. It was just like a thing, I didn't have nightmares about it. I just thought like, yeah, some stuff happens to you, but it hasn't affected me, whatever. But yeah, so it just becomes clear that my whole life has been ruled by a lack of forgiveness. I grew up hating white people, and harboring I'm so racist, a deep resentment. Growing up in the South, the stories I could tell. The stories people they just don't believe. They're like, oh, it didn't happen. I'm like, okay, well, all right, but it happened though, and so so it was just obvious that a core feature of my life was just unforgiveness for myself, unforgiveness for white people generally as a group. I mean, really, it's crazy. I used to think of white people as subhuman. Really, that was my coping. I was like, well, there must be something wrong with them because they all treat me so bad. So it was like a coping mechanism. Well, like, okay, you just got to lower your expectations for white people. It's kind of like, if a dog's riding a skateboard, just be happy that the dog's riding the skateboard. Don't expect it to start talking, like that's how I kind of, it's like white people are clearly doing their best, but there's something broken in them. They lack maybe empathy. They just don't know clearly because they're all racist and mean to me. But, and so don't blame them. They're doing their best, right? But they're just not, just like blatantly evil, racist things that just, because I just couldn't forget, and on and on and on and on. So, the journey of forgiveness was huge, and along the way, the Lord just alerted. I remember reading, Matthew 5 and 6, and finishing with a prayer of like, oh God, I'm glad I don't have any enemies. And long story short, like the dumbest thing, the stuff that like new Christians pray, I remember I had this image come to mind. It's 2 or 3 months after my conversion. Image come to mind. It's like a pie chart, like 8 of the like a pie like in 10 slices or something, right? And like 8 of the slices are pristine and white, and then like 2 of them are filled with this like black sludge, and the Lord saying, Lord, Brent, that's your heart. I want to live there, but there's not enough room for me, because essentially the black parts are the part of you devoted to hating white people. That specifically, that word, devoted to hating white people. I want to live there, but there's not enough room for me, right? Now, whatever, now, I have a lot of theology now, so I don't know if God would even communicate to me in that way now, right? But 3 months saved, that's how he communicated to me. And that was I'm like, I hate white people. I'm like, I don't hate white people. And then I remember talking to my dad. I'm like, do you think I hate white people? He's like, yeah. And I was like, oh, like, really? And I go to other people. I'm like, hey, do you think I hate white people? They're like, yeah, obviously. And I'm like, oh, so I'm like, oh, so that starts me on this journey of forgiveness. And of course, later, being faithful over little moments that nobody ever saw or would care about. I end up getting rolled up on by a bunch of white people, said they're going to kill me and call me a nigger and a coon and all these different things. And I end up forgiving them, and it goes viral or whatever. But it was, that was just like, that wasn't the hard thing, to me. It was like, oh, like it was a weird experience for me to be on CNN for that act, because I felt like that wasn't the hardest thing. How hard it is to forgive someone who's betrayed you and gave you STD, and it was like, I can do anything. Like it just wasn't. I didn't think of it. I didn't even think of it as like a racial reconciliation. I thought of it as, well, I'm a Christian. I have enemies. I have an obligation to Christ. So I got to figure out a way to forgive them. And of course, I think that small moments of obedience along the way made it so when that moment came up, so much of my racism had been repented for and confessed and like worked on. I had, so it was just like, I don't know. It was just a different, it was a different response. because I'd been, I don't know, practicing, I guess, So the CNN thing was kind of strange, and I felt weird about it. I felt like I was being applauded for not cheating on my wife. It's kind of how I felt. I was like I felt awkward. I'm like, well, like I'm just like that's not a good sign that if Christians get on CNN for doing what Christians are supposed to do. Like, oh yeah, what does that say? The witness of Christ is so devoid in our current culture that if a Christian just does literally like the opening sermon, anything in the opening sermon of Jesus, that it's like noteworthy enough that they're on TV or something. It just felt weird to me. Like but I get it now. But at the time, I was such, when you're a new believer, it's just a different world. So, but maybe another call, because I know we've.
Well, yeah, it's just so interesting because it's almost like people would see that and say, well, you're justified to be so angry about this and not forgive this, right? And that was your experience growing up. You learned that there are certain people that are out to get me, that cannot be trusted.
Right.
And, you almost made this excuse in your head, like, oh, well, I'm not going to blame them because it's just part of their programming, right? Like my programming is me, their programming is them. And so that gave you peace, right? That gave you at least a peaceful, like, you know what? I can live with this. And then you have this experience where to you, it was totally normal to do that. So I know like you've talked so much and shared so much.
I know you have a thing, so I just don't want to.
I would love for you to share more details about this experience. Like, what specifically did you do or say that was so noteworthy? You say to the outside, but it was not like, what was that thing that you did or you said that was just part of your nature?
Yeah. So the event itself, I was training for track. I was doing some summer training. I was outside, whatever. It doesn't matter. And long story short, pickup truck full of some white guys. I was on campus. They roll by and they start, insulting me and trying to start something. And then they come back and they do it again. And then they come back and it's just me. It's like 5 of them and it's just me. And they're like, hey, we're going to kill you. And it's just one of those things. Well, it's a man thing, right? Like they were what they were doing was putting me in a position where either I submit or I engage in the conflict, and then they beat me up, right? Like that's kind of how it's just like it's male dynamics, right? So they are, in one way, shape, or form, like just trying to what's the word for that? Like either way, they're trying to put me in a lose-lose situation, whatever. And so either way, there's a moment where it could have escalated to a really bad place, but I didn't do anything about it. And so it's just a moment of racism, and hey, we're gonna kill you and we're gonna stomp your nigger ass, and look this way. If you look this way, we're gonna get out of this car and beat your ass and blah blah blah. And then they'll come, whatever, right? You niggers aren't supposed, whatever, right? All the stuff. And so I remembered I'm training and it's happening, and I'm like, there's lots. There's a lot there. But the point is, at the end, though it was a humiliating thing, I remember picking up my phone and I'm texting my campus minister who had been discipling me. His name is Andrew. He's like greatest man ever. The whitest white man of all time. Is like a monument to whiteness that God put into my life to heal my hatred of white people. I mean, really, I mean, just like he I owe him. The Bible says you do not have many fathers. Paul's like, you do not have many fathers in Christ, right? And but yeah, he loved the actual hell out of me, and really God used him as a vessel to redeem the image of white people, because I couldn't I couldn't deny that he too was white. I remember being like, Andrew, you're my nigga. And he's like, oh my gosh. He's like, turns white. He's like, I don't even know how to respond. Right? And I'm like, I don't think you're really white, because I know white people. Like I'm in my own way, I'm trying to compliment him. And he was very wise. And he was like, after he turned beet red. I was like, Brent, thank you. I think, but I'm white. Like I am white, and so like you should know that I'm white. And that changed. I'm like, oh, it was just God used that to be like, oh wait, oh okay, I can't think about. I'm wrong, right? I have some big idea about what it means to be white, who white people are, or whatever, and Andrew doesn't fit in that box, so I'm taking him out of the box. I'm saying, oh, okay, yeah, well, you're clearly not white, and he is wisely saying, no, you're just wrong. You're just wrong. Maybe you're wrong for good reasons, but you're wrong. So it's helpful. So there's all these things along the way. So I'm texting Andrew. I'm like, hey, you'll never guess what just happened. It's just a Tuesday in Wilmington, and then I go back to training because it was more significant of an injustice than normal, but not like that much. It wasn't so different. There's a reason I grew up hating white people. So it wasn't so different from my life. I didn't even think about telling somebody about it. I was telling him almost as like a joke or something. And so either way, he's like, are you okay? Like, are you still around? Well, either way, I am. And to answer your question directly, so I'm walking away, and I'm praying, and I remember that the ringleader reminds me of a guy who's in my like Bible study, who I love, a white guy, and he just like he favored him, and I just remember thinking like, oh man, like it really sucks that they like I don't know what happened in his life to make I don't like these guys, I don't know them, but like I wonder how they got that way, because I know, and I was thinking Zach, like man, like he reminds me of Zach, and like Zach loves me, and like we have a relationship, Christ is torn down the dividing wall of hostility between us and his, so it was like the first time in my life I had like a curiosity. It wasn't just like, oh well, yep, that confirms all my biases about X, Y, or Z. It was just like, and I just remember praying for them, being like, oh Lord, like would you? And so now I'm crying, and I'd made many vows in my life, but I had vowed early on I would never cry about white people or what they did to me ever again, ever, So I'm like, oh, I'm crying, and I'm like, why are you crying? I'm like, whoa, what's going on? And I'm like, and I feel like God's like, because you love them, and I'm like, oh, yeah, so it's not even so much it came out of my nature so much. It was I would say it was the result of discipleship. I've been being discipled for a year, and trying to trust the Lord and being faithful over little, and God making me rule over more, and forgiving that person, and like learning that, and acknowledging like, oh, I have this racism in my heart, whatever, and which was even that was it was 2014. It's like BLM riots and Ferguson. It's like I'm a black guy. I'm not supposed to say stuff like that, right? So there's a lot of things that are happening along the way. Well, either way, I feel like I'm like, okay, I feel like I'm supposed to go. I'm like, okay, well then, Lord, what do I do? And he's like, oh, I feel like it's like, go tell your coach. So I tell my coach. Long story short, they're like, hey, this is a hate crime, and we find these people, and all these different things. And so get to the school, and I'm talking to the dean. And they're like, hey, when we find them, we're going to prosecute them to the furthest extent of the law, and they're going to be expelled. This is a hate crime. It's dangerous. All these different things. And, if you hadn't responded in the way you responded, this could be a very different story. And this is what we're doing. And I remember thinking like, okay, I mean, I guess, but like, I didn't like that response. It just felt like, so, and I'm trying to figure out, well, what is it about that I don't enjoy? And so either I go back home, and I'm praying about it, and I'm like, oh yeah, because it doesn't help. It doesn't do anything. And it doesn't address the real issue, which is that likely, just as I was taught to hate by circumstance and experience, they likely were taught to hate in the same way. It's the mercy of God. It's the kindness of God, Romans 1, right? That leads people to repentance. Yeah, so I'm just like, so I write this letter to the sheriff and the dean of students, and I'm like, hey, this happened to me. Like I'd already said, hey, do I have any say about what happens? And they're like, respectfully, no. I'm like, okay. But I wrote a letter anyways. I'm like, look, hey, this happened to me. This is some of my experience, and like, I get that you guys are trying to do right by me, but it is a learning institution, and I think there's an opportunity to educate here, and like compassion for them. Like, I don't know their story, like, but I know if they got to know me, like I doubt that this would be the situation. And so would you consider if they are found, they be forced to have dinner with me for a couple of months, like that be their punishment? And so I sent a letter. I didn't think anyone was. I just sent it to the dean and the sheriff or whatever. Well, apparently, they were so moved by it, they sent it out to the entire student body. And I was like, oh, okay. And then from there, it gets to some other news outlets, and now people are interviewing me and like, why are you responding this way? I'm like, Jesus, Jesus loves his enemies, and there were I withheld some information from the public, not to the police, but like from the public, because I'm like, because my teammates are already like, hey, yeah, we know, Brent, you're a Christian. That doesn't matter. If we find them, we're going to jump them. Okay, that's what's going to happen. So we appreciate it, though. You're a nice guy, right? So there were a lot of people who were very angry on my behalf. It's just after Trayvon Martin shooting. There's a lot of stuff going on. And so I withheld some information to the public so that they wouldn't be harmed if they were found by someone who wasn't the police. And so different things, and people are mad at me about so there's different dynamics. And so by the time CNN comes along, it becomes this like, why are you responding this way? And I'm like, well, I'm just trying to treat them the way I feel like Jesus has treated me. I mean, that's just it's what he's done. You have freely, you have been given, so freely give. And so yeah, and that was weird to them. And they're very good at editing, boys. CNN, I threw Jesus all throughout that thing, and they, their editing is superb. But yeah, it was I would say, and to end, I'd say one of the a moment that sort of clarifies maybe the spiritual battle going on. The reporter for CNN, so they've flown out and they're interviewing me, and he's like, hey, sorry. One of the guys had shouted his name, or at least a name. I don't know if it was actually his name or not, but shouted like his first name, and it was like, hey, and if because guys, right? Because men, and like, hey, we're not afraid of you. Like, if you want to do something about it, this is whatever, right? So very, very braggadocious, and so I wouldn't tell anybody. I told the police, oh, this is the name he gave me. I don't know if that's his real name or not, but I wouldn't tell anybody. And so the CNN reporter is like, hey, like 30 million people are going to see this. And I promise you, we'll find them. Just tell us the name, give us a brief description of what they look like. And I'm telling you, and within a week, we'll find them. Right. And I was like, I can't do that. I can't do that. And he was so angry. He's like, why are you protecting them? And I was like, I'm doing for them what Jesus has done for me. I mean, you know how many times I sinned and I was proud of it? You have no idea how much mercy God has shown to me. No, I don't want them to be hurt. And he's like, well, why? I'm like, because I love them. And he was so angry. He was so angry. So that was like the end of the interview. But yeah, so that was the element. It was the timing. I'm Black, so that, I'm the right ethnicity, the timing. It was a bit unorthodox. And I guess also it was just sort of organic. I wasn't like, I didn't think any of that was going to happen. I didn't like send anything out. And yeah, so it was just one of those things.
Brent, thank you for sharing that, because it's so just the rawness of it. Like, you are able to just tell it from your heart, the truth that it is, like what it really was, and lay it out there with such just honesty and authenticity. And this is your story to tell. So thank you for sharing it. I do have to ask you though, like, did you ever have dinner with them? Do you ever have dinner with anyone?
It sucks because there's some details to that, but they were never found.
Okay.
They were never found. I think it's possible they could have been found if some of it, there's layers, right? Because the school was kind of in CYA mode, and it wasn't clear they were taking it all that seriously, and then they had to because it's like on CNN. But it doesn't matter. But yeah, they were never found. And honestly, it does suck because well, you know, and on CNN they're like, well, do you have any message for them? You know, and I'm like, well, hey, I forgive you, and I mean it, and I really like to, you know, like I really like to, whatever other people think, like I actually forgive you, and I'd love to have dinner with you. And that was good because it was so viral. They know who they are. So I was like, well, you know, it's not as great as I, you know, so I wish, because I really wish, like, but honestly, it's probably for the best because it doesn't matter my good intentions. Other people did not have good intentions. So
yeah.
So it's probably all for the best. But no, I never got to meet them. The incident happened on a place on campus that doesn't have like cameras. It's just like, it was like a rec field. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's just, so you're kind of going off of, and then you don't know, do they live on campus or off campus? Are they even students? I mean, they look student age. It's the summer, so there's not a lot of people on campus anyway. There's all these factors that just made it really difficult. They never found them. Yeah, that was that.
But that was your go-to idea, that I want to sit and break bread with you, and, you know, like, not only for them to get to know you, but also for you to say, like, I honestly want you to see who I am.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, you wouldn't, whatever led you guys to do what you were doing, like, you if you knew me, you wouldn't, you know, it's just like, I'm pretty easy to like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, I'm like the most unoffendable. Whatever caricature you have, I promise, like, it. I think we could find some common ground and stuff. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting, and maybe you've experienced this before, Rachel, where you're asking God to do something in your life, and it's not obvious if He's done it. Like, maybe you're like, God, I want to be more, you know, I want to be more kind, I want to be more loving, like, or whatever the thing is, right? It's a hard thing that it's not easy to tell. Maybe your outward behavior is changing, but it's not easy to tell if you yourself are changing, or you're just behavior modification, right? And I mean, nothing wrong with that. I think, like, hey, if do all you can, right? Modify your behavior. I'm a big fan of that. But like, that was the surprising thing to me. It was a surprise to me that I was not forcing myself to have that response. I can't say it was easy. It's easy. It was an easier thing than people might think, even though it was not necessarily easy, right? Because they said things to me. They said things to me I've never told anyone except for maybe my brother, right? That were so I would say demonic. That were so it was almost like supernaturally accurate on my insecurities, my deepest fears. I mean, you know, really, and things I don't talk about, because that's how, you know, it was just like so accurate, and it's almost like there is nothing a human being could have said that would have targeted more humiliation to me. You know, so it wasn't easy, in that I had to, you know, I had to fight my pride, and I had to deal with this humiliation and real, like, hurt, you know, and for reasons that I couldn't easily explain to other people, because it had to do with abuse and just different things that it just was like, so there was hardship in the forgiveness, though it was in areas that are not obvious. That wouldn't be obvious to people. So yeah, it was hard, but it was a good moment for me, because it was a moment where I felt like God proved to me that He had been doing something in my life that I didn't have to manufacture. That I wasn't just being like, oh, I guess that's what Christians do. You know, that really wasn't why I was. It wasn't an obligation, even though that would have been fine if it was, right? But it wasn't. It was kind of like, you know, that was really what was in there, and that was a surprise to me. They're like, oh wow, I'm crying about white people. You know, like, what's happening? This can't happen. You know, and not because I'm hurt, right? And not because, but I'm feeling something for them. Whoa, you know. So yeah. But yeah, so
Brent, that is That's just amazing. And just, I hope that you feel how proud, like I feel for you. I hope that you walked away from that saying like, man, I am dang proud of myself, like who I am now. Look who I was before and look where I'm at now. So I hope that you just feel so proud of who you are and who you are still becoming. And I know that you're working on a book
I am.
about forgiveness, and we're going to post your link so people can join your newsletter and stay connected
Huh.
with you, so that when you are finished with your book, then
That's what I'm working on. Yep.
we can celebrate that with you um, and enjoy more of your message.
Well, hey, I appreciate it, because the funny thing is that was the beginning of that. I thought I'm learning, like, man, I'm learning all about loving enemies, and I thought the CNN moment was like that was the cap. I was like, yay! All right, great. Now we'll move on. And it was just the beginning, and with a level of such frequency that then it became obvious to me, like, okay, like the odds of things like this happening to me over and over and over and over are not fantastic. So it's not a coincidence. And because I mean, that next year, the year after that, I lived with a neo-Nazi for a year. Oh my
Wow.
God. If whatever I thought I knew about loving enemies, uh, I learned so much more. And so the book explores, there's this thing that people know about, but it's like there are things people don't know about. CNN wasn't around. That God has really used to sharpen, and more and more and more and more and more over the next year. I'd say there was like at least one major significant racial thing pretty much every year after that. And so I was like, okay, all right, Lord, I'm slow, but I'm not that slow. So I guess, and I appreciate you for, obviously we've been here for an hour and a half, and I know it's significantly longer than the normal, and I talk too much. And so
I love it.
have mercy on me. So
this is so important, and it's worth sharing. And that's why I do this podcast, because this is, living our life on purpose, living intentionally. And that's what you're doing right now. And you remind me of this saying that sometimes I bring to mind, that's from the Dalai Lama, when someone asked him about, well, what do you do with this hatred, right? Where you've been so persecuted by country, right? And so persecuted. And he talks about, you have friends and then you have sacred friends. And the sacred friends are the ones who really require that depth, right? And that change of heart,
yeah,
that you want to get to, because you just want to be in a peaceful place so that you can, live a really beautiful life. And so you have had some sacred friends who, like, you can hold those relationships in a couple of different ways. You can hold them with bitterness, or
yeah,
you can hold them with compassion. And so I really appreciate the depth that you have expressed this, because you could just share this as a very surface story, like, this is what happened to me. But I think this time that we've invested in this has gotten to the depth of the significance. And
yeah.
I know that it will impact others. So thank you for your generosity.
Well, yeah. You're so welcome, and it's a pleasure. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So because this podcast is called Life on Purpose, I always end with this question. And you can think of it like, what are you doing today on purpose, or what are you doing in your life to live on purpose right now? But Brent, what are you doing in your life to live your life on purpose?
Today is a good one.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I'll answer it from two perspectives. One is I am repenting and trying to recommit to trusting God in the smallest areas that nobody will ever know about. They don't come up in a sermon. It's not, you know what I'm saying? The things that seem really, really insignificant. And that's difficult. And I don't enjoy it, but I enjoy it kind of, but yeah, but there's a reason I'm trying to repent, because I feel like I haven't been doing that in the ways that I want to. And so yeah, that's a way I'm trying to live on purpose, in particular to like today, I feel like I need to go visit a person who's in the hospital. And it's so people are not inconvenient, but the situation is rife with multiple levels of inconvenience. And so I am so today, like actually today, that's what I'm trying to take very seriously. Jesus being like, hey, like, when you go visit people who are sick, you're doing that to me, right? And I want to and it's, without going into detail, it's just so tempting not to. You know what I'm saying? It's just like, it's just so, I'm almost incentivized not to take, I'm trying not to take it seriously almost. Because if it's like, if you really start taking Jesus seriously, you'd have to change your life. It's like, man, I can't take you that seriously. And I feel that, I feel that tug of like, oh man, but I'm so busy, and it doesn't matter. And so today, that's what I'm trying to do. We go visit my friend, and yes. So
Wonderful.
today, that's what we do.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you for sharing how you have become more purposeful in your life. This has been a delight. I have laughed and I've cried and I've felt all the feelings. And so I'm so grateful that we connected. Yeah. And for my listeners, make sure you check out that link so you can stay connected to Brent and all the work that he is doing. So thank you so much, Brent.
Of course. You're welcome.
Thank you so much for joining me today. If you are ready to live your life with greater purpose and intention, check out my free Power of Vision workshop, where you'll uncover your life dream, eliminate doubt, and move forward toward your goals with confidence. Get instant access with the provided link. Your life is too precious to live just by chance or by default. I want you to live your life on purpose. I will see you next time.